Hello, and welcome back to our series where we are building a people and culture management system. This series is brought to you by Prairie HR Solutions. My name is Jake Finger, Principal Consultant and founder here at Prairie HR Solutions. And we now have a fully functioning compensation dashboard of sorts that is essentially one level. And what I mean by one level is you can filter it down either by division or job title or functional family, job level, state, all that. So it's one level. You can only filter it down one level. So if we choose, say, finance, the finance division, it'll filter that data based on that finance division. If we choose job title, go to like operations specialist, it'll filter it the entire data set on the job title. So that's what I mean by one level. Now, this works if you're looking across the department or the agency or the company, whatever your instance is. If you're just wanting to know, well, let's do a compensation on all three-level jobs, those mid-year or those mid-career jobs, but you need to be able to drill down in order to absolutely get the data that you need to do an analysis on. You need to drill it down into it. And the way I'm going to do this is I would like to think of it as sort of the HR business partner concept. HR business partners essentially partner with a division. So the first drill down that I'd like to do is our division. And the way I'm going to approach this is we could go back into our data and create cascading drop downs. But I like having the entire company available because yes, we don't need to, there are certain things that we do need to drill down on, but then there's other things like all this, everybody in the executive job level, which should exist in the executive branch. It would be nice to see what that group is actually doing. You can say total weekend pay. Wow. Okay. And then from this data, you're actually able to say, okay, now I know what it is that I need to drill down on. And that would be, well, where are these levels? Obviously, these levels here are in this division. So I want to start tackling the division to where we could essentially lock this field. Let's say we choose, I don't know, IT, the IT division. I'd like to be able to put like a switch here to lock this. And then if that switch is set to checked, true, then what I want us to do is be able to continue filtering by all the jobs that are inside this IT division. So let's first, this is going to be probably a multi-episode piece because there's going to be a lot of things happening here. We're going to have to keep this essentially, keep our functionality here, but then kind of create a branch or an offshoot that is intercepted by a switch. So first things first, let's go grab a switch and put it right in front of our division wording here. So since we're using Bootstrap, what we're going to do is we're going to come over here to Bootstrap and see what they have already built in for switches. So it looks like select, checks and radios. We could just use a typical checkbox here. If you want to, you can. I'm more of a kind of those are kind of run into the ground. Let's do something different here. See if they have something different. If not, we can come up with something. Radio buttons. Now, oh, here we go. Switch. Okay, I like that. So what we can do is just come up here and grab this. And then come back over here to our code and let's find out where our division span is. Okay, well, here's our label, which is the span. And we want to put it right in front of our wording. So we want it to be within this label. So it has to be within the label tags. So let's put it right here. Because this way, this will appear. We don't need this word. We don't need this label here. Yeah, we should use the label for screen readers, but we don't need the words here. Okay, so let's go see how that looks. Make this a little bit bigger here. Just noticed it's still at 100. There we go. So let's go see how this looks. It looks like that actually looks perfect. Looks like we don't have to do anything with spacing or anything. I like how that looks. Then you can switch this. So the idea is, say we pick human resources. Human resources data will populate, but then we want to lock that drop-down box there. And then once this is locked, then it knows, okay, I'm automatically going to filter by this. And then I need to filter this data by the job title. So that'll be the first two that we do. So let's go ahead and work on that. Let's first figure out how we can identify if this box here is checked. So let's come back here to our code and give our checkbox here, our switch box, a ID. So this ID would be, let's not use this. Let's call this, since we're going to have multiple, let's call this comp div check switch. And then what we're going to need to do is take this for our screen readers and put it there for our label. And then let's also go ahead and give this a function to run right now, just so we can test this out. So let's give this an on-click function. Now, when you start typing on, you'll see that you're going to get a pop-up, and you'll see all these options that you can do. It's, on scroll, on focus, on form change, on select. So on select, I know it's tempting, but what on select is, and I do this all the time, is if you have like a big block of text inside like a text area box, a multi-line box, and a user highlights a certain word or a group, then what you can do is once that's highlighted and selected, you can fire off a code. So this comes in handy if there's like a word or something that you have bold and a person like highlights it, you can have that highlight do something else, like maybe further define it or take it somewhere else. But that's what that on select is. For now, we want our checkbox to be clicked. So we're listening for the click of that checkbox. And what we'll do is we will fire a code called comp div lock. I suppose that'll work. Okay, so now we need to just create this code. So let's copy this and then come over to our total rewards JS piece, and let's put this, let's put it above our other filters. So let's find our filters, this comp filter. As you can see, in our last episode, I took the same mentality of what we used for consolidating and condensing our code, and I did the same thing here. So that's why this may look different, but it's the same thing that we did in that last video. I just kind of expanded it. And this is going to be our function comp div lock. So with a switch or a checkbox, it's really a Boolean value. Is it checked or if it's not? If it's checked, it's going to return the Boolean true. If it's not, it's going to return false. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for if the checked is false or if the checked is true. So what we're going to need to do is grab that switch by the ID, and let's just call it comp div check switch. And this is going to be a document, get element by ID. And this ID is going to be comp div check switch. And we're not going to check the value of that. We're going to check. We're not going to get the value of that. What we're going to do is get the status of it being checked. And to do that, we simply say checked. So now if it is checked, it's going to return true. If it's not checked, it's going to return false. And that's what we're going to check for. That's what we're going to assess. And we can do that through an if statement. So if comp div check switch is strictly equal to, now remember, one equal sign is essentially very loose, kind of meets the criteria, but may not, but we're going to run it anyway. 2 is value, if the value is equal to that. And then 3 is what we call strict, which means the value and the type are exactly the same. So we're looking for a Boolean value. So that's why you're going to need to use the 3 strict marks here. So if it is true, what do we want to do? Let's just call an alert and we'll say check switch is switched. And then if not, let's create an alert and say check is unchecked. And now what this should do is simply give us an alert based on the status of that checkbox. So let's save this and then we'll go back to our page here. We'll have to style this because that's the white on the bluish gray works, but blue is a little bit off. Okay, so this should have fired and nada. Okay, so let's see what actually we did. Comp div lock. Okay, so our comp div lock here. Okay, so that's that. So that should fire it. And then here's our function. This is the function that should be running. Comp div switch is that. Yep, so that's fine. And then if the comp div switch is true, so let's make sure that this comp div lock is actually being called. I am called. Okay, so we'll save this and then come back over to our page here and refresh it. And if this doesn't work, we'll pull up our F12 and see actually what happens. Okay, so this should fire. It's not. So let's go see what's going on. Pull up our F12. Okay, so that must mean that there's an ID error or something here. So let's see what we got. Let's come back over here to our code. So looking at, so it's not actually calling our code. So let's see what is happening. So we got the label. Here's our input. When we click this input, oh, so our function is inside this label. That's the problem. Our function is inside the label, and we're not pressing a label. We're pressing our switch, our input class. Okay, so that should be good. Now let's go back to our JS. Okay, that should be good. Okay, so now let's try it. So now it should at least be called. So let's refresh this. Okay, good. I am called. That's that first alert. Check switch is switched. Now we'll close this. Notice when we use alerts, it's actually stopping the function from running until you click OK. So just keep in mind if you're using alerts, that's what alerts do. They stop the function until you click OK. So that could come in handy, but I don't like the alerts anyway because it has that top piece in Google Apps Script, a user at this ridiculously long URL. Okay, good. And then I am called and I am unchecked. Okay, good. So now we have that. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is whatever is selected here, and we use this switch, we want this to be locked. So let me get rid of these here. But when this is on, we don't want to be able to change this because that's going to be our filterable value. We're essentially wanting to lock this. So what we can do is we can set that to disabled. So let's get rid of this, get rid of this, get rid of this now that we're connected. So what we would like to do is to come over and grab this input select box, this comp division, and make it disabled. And the disabled is the same thing as the checkbox. It's dot disabled and it's either true or false. So what we can do is let's create another variable up here and let's call this comp division, I guess. That's what it is. Okay, and we'll end that because we're going to be doing a lot of things with it. We can just add the value, add disabled or whatnot. So what if it's true, what we want to do is take that comp division and set the disabled, right, to true. And if it's not, then we want to do the comp division, if I can spell it right, disabled equals false. So now whenever we do something with that switch, it's going to check if it's true. And if it is, it's going to disable that. If it's not, it's going to undisable it, I guess. Okay, so let's save this and see how that works. Okay, we'll refresh it. So now if we turn it on, we shouldn't be able to click it. We can't. We select something, turn it on, should not be able to do it, and we're not. So this is essentially locked. Maybe in the future we can also make this, I don't know, grayed or something like that. But for now, that works good. So now what we would need to do is grab, once this is locked, we need to grab the value of this. So let's create another variable. Let's call that let div value is going to be equal to the comp division dot value. And then let's just go ahead and create an alert to show what that is. Oops. Shouldn't be a string. Because this ultimately would be what we sent over to our server side, our Google Apps Script side, to start filtering. Apologies, let's change this over. So what we did was we created a variable to grab our comp division value, and we're simply going to put an alert in there to show that value once this is checked. So let's save this. And then let's come back over here and we'll refresh it. And we should get an alert with whatever value is in here. So if we switch it, no alert, all divisions, yep, there's our alert. It's locked, so we have to unlock it, do information technology, and then lock it. And our alert will pop up saying information technology. Good. Good, 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 good. Okay, so now we have that piece done. So now what we would like to do is to take this and send it over to our server side. And what we can do is we can create, let's just create an actual function to kind of handle this real quick. We'll get it functional, and then just like all the other times, we'll get it functional, and then we'll go back and figure out how we can squeeze it all together and condense it into one as much as we possibly can. So what we can do is let's just have this call a function, and let's just say filter locked. So it's going to call this function. So let's create this function here. Just for the demonstration purposes of keeping it separate. And what this function is going to do is this function is actually going to, we'll need this again. This function is actually going to need to run a Google Apps Script function. So it's going to need to take this comp division value and send it over to our Google Apps Script side. So let's actually just create another one. It is going to be, let's just grab this dot value. Okay. And then what we're going to do is run a Google Apps Script code. So we need to do Google Script run, and we need this to be a with success handler because we're going to get that stuff back. And right now we'll just leave, well, actually this should be process data eventually. Just like down here, when we finally run it all, it's processing the data to populate the chart. So the Google Apps Script, that server side code that we're going to need to run, let's just call it get div filtered data. And what we're going to pass through here is this filtered division variable. Okay, good. So let's go call this or create this function. Now this function, before I end this video, I want to show us, I kind of want to set the stage for the next video because I want us to take a value, filter it down, and then take that value and filter it down. And then that'll demonstrate how we are going to cascade filters and then return the appropriate data. Now, when we think about doing cascades, we can either do it as for each, which we probably will end up doing, but for the sake of, kind of instructions and learning, I'd like to show y'all the basic of that if true statement or that if else statement, that logic piece, and then we can condense it down and actually run a for each. I just want you to know what's happening in the back end, at the base level. Okay, so let's create this get filtered div filtered data code. And we can put that, let's just put that down right down here at the bottom. So now what we're going to need to do with this is first we're going to need to filter by whatever value this is. Now we don't have a value here because we're not actually running it yet, but let's go ahead and let's just create a test variable. Let's call this division, and we'll say this is the executive division. And then let's do the next one over is the job title. So let's just create a test variable called job, and we'll say that is accountant. And now what we need to do is actually get all of our data filtered by this initial division. So let's create yet another variable, and we'll call that variable div filter. And this div filter is going to be equal to that employee full data, so our entire sheet, It's going to look a little bit something like that. And what we can do is filter that data, and we're going to filter it by row. We'll use our arrow function here. And the row at the index is going to be whatever the index of the division is. Now, remember, we did our employee count by the division. So it's going to be that fifth column, or that fifth, not column, excuse me, that fifth index, because this is coming to us as a two-dimensional array. That's what this is. And what we're wanting to filter it by is if it is equal to div. Now what we can do is we can log this out and see what we got. Now we should only have the data that is within the executive. And this executive is in the division column, which exists at index number 5 in this array. So let's save that so it'll pick it up and then we can run it. So let's run this and see what we get here in our log. So you should see executive branch, or not executive branch, sorry, executive division. And then come down here again, executive, executive. Yep, perfect. Okay, so we only have the filter data in the executive branch. Now what we can do is we can now take this array and filter it again. So let's create another variable and let's call this job filter. And now we're not going to take this entire array. Now we're going to take this array. We are going to cascade it down. So we'll take our div filter dot filter, and we're going to filter that by every row, or whatever it is you want to call it. Just make sure it's consistent. Now this time, our row is going to be that job title. So it's not the job title in the sheet, it's the job title in this array. And a way that we can do that, because the job title or the array is going to match this, it's just going to be index based. So let's find, okay, here's our job title. And if we scroll it over, it's 19, but remember an array is 0 base. So this here should be at index 18 because we subtract that 1 to make up the 0 index. So let's put 18 in here and then see what it's like and then see what happens. And we're going to set this to the job title accountant, which is stored in that variable. And then let's logger this out. Job filter, and then we'll run it. You'll see we have all the executives, and then inside the executives we have the accountant, and it looks like we only have one accountant. Okay, good. So now what we can do is actually drill down into this further if we wanted to, using that same kind of logic. Like we could put, human resources in here or whatever. And if it doesn't exist, it will return an empty array. As you can see, the human resources division does not have an accountant inside that division or assigned to that division. So what we can do now, and in our next video, is we can start building out some logic to this. So we could essentially return this variable, which is, or this variable here, which includes all of our data, which it already is. If you think about it, it already is populated on that sheet because we returned the division up here. What we're wanting to do then is to grab the job piece and then create this and then send that back to populate, because that way it will only be the data that is from this division filter. So I'm going to end this video here, and the next video, what we will do is we will start taking this and then integrating it into our code that we already have to kind of update that stuff. So yeah, that's what we'll do. We'll just end it here. I hope this was informative, and I look forward to the next video. I just didn't want to get this too long. But until next time, please take care.